Okay, and good evening and welcome. Thanks everyone again for being here on wherever you might be in the world, whether you're watching it live or on the replay. And wonderful to have you again. And tonight's topic of conversation here with Gerard Schaefer again is going to be the universal method, which is an interesting one. He's taught a couple of times now. Last year as the test run in some workshops in Melbourne and here in Adelaide. And Brian will explain the inspiration behind, drawing on the inspiration from, over 75 other modalities and then combining it with his framework of what he presents in the nature of life. And if you're catching this on a replay and you're not familiar with Brian's work and you've never seen the book that he's written, here it is. It's called The Nature of Life. And it's a 600-page textbook, which I'll pop the link in the chat box for anyone that hasn't purchased the book. But tonight, it'll be a little bit different. A lot of the material, obviously, that's written in the book, Brian will explain, presents more from what he would call a top-down level, whereas the inspiration behind the universal method was actually to start to bring the material together and present it from what he would call a bottom-up perspective. So it's a very interesting workshop when you attend it live, and no doubt Brian's going to introduce the universal method tonight, tell us a little bit more about it, and perhaps even run through one of the worksheets that comes with what is the universal method. So Brian, thanks again for being here. Looking forward to hearing all about the universal method again. And sub-warning, there may be a couple of sips of green smoothie amongst the chat tonight to keep the energies up.
All right. Hi, everyone. And thanks for joining us. Yeah, I missed dinner tonight, so I had to settle for a green smoothie. So anyway, my usual helpers here aren't here because they're still looking after little Pedals who's recovering from a dog attack. So she's going well. Just everyone's been asking. Yeah, she's doing well. So so tonight's talk, the universal method. There's a bit of a story involved with this, and again, I've already explained it in other videos, but I'll just give this as a intro, as a bit of a lead into the potential of where this is going, because so far I've only introduced the workshop in 2 workshops. I've done 2 workshops as an introduction, and like everything I do, it can grow exponentially and indefinitely, like infinitely. So far, I took a bit of refining with it. It's still not refined. Like I said, everybody just has to bear with me until I get it exactly right. As everybody knows, like it's got to be exact when I work with it. And to be honest, I haven't really given it a lot of attention for the last maybe 6 months really, because I've been focusing on getting the next books written and doing other events, including these ones on the Zoom calls. So the whole idea with the universal method is to complement the other 2 modalities that I've created, which are universal kinetics, which is the kinesiology system that brings together all other healing modalities into a kinesiology protocol, which that's working with directly with the body itself and communicating with the body. So the book that I wrote, The Nature of Life, How to Remain at Peace While Living in the Modern World, that's actually the theory book for the practical element, which is the universal kinetics, the universal method, and the universal Ho'oponopono. So the universal kinetics, that's where practitioners can work with their clients through any issue. It's not just working on problems, it's also helping to initiate and maintain growth. So it works on both, and it's working with the entire model of the book, and it also brings together every other healing modality into the protocol. So to make it all just seamless. So the charts that you see on the wall here, they're all the essences of the different parts of my book. So we use those as as part of the universal kinetics. So that's where practitioners know and understand the material enough to consciously work with their clients. And at the same time, once you actually know it, you can do it on yourself as well. So that's top down and bottom up, right? So then the universal Ho'oponopono, that's primarily a top down approach to healing. That's where you can do it remotely. You don't actually have to be in person with the person. You can do it in person, but you can do it remotely. You can do the universal kinetics remotely as well. It's like I said, it's top down and bottom up. So the universal method is primarily a top down perspective, but it incorporates the bottom up, right? So the universal method is primarily a bottom up approach, but it incorporates the top down perspective as well. So in that sense, I've got all bases covered. So the universal kinetics, it brings together the top down and the bottom up. The universal Ho'oponopono, it's primarily the top down and brings the bottom up into it. And then you've got the universal method, which is the bottom up and brings in the top down when needed. So it is quite complex getting your head around it, but it's like anything when you learn it. There's steps involved with each stage of learning. So far, I've only taught the universal method at the beginner level, at the introduction level. And when I say I've brought together, I actually lost count of how many other modalities and practices that I brought into it. But at last count, it was 75. And that sounds a lot, but when you know and understand all these, like I've studied and researched all the different healing modalities, you can bring the best of all of them into whatever you're doing, whether it's universal kinetics, universal Ho'oponopono, or the universal method. And the thing is if you know the universal kinetics and you know the universal Ho'oponopono, you can do those, you can do any modality at any point of anybody's healing. Like even the other day, I was working with somebody doing the universal kinetics, and I had to stop and do the universal method, right? So the idea of what I'm sharing is that you can bring into whatever needs to be done at any point in time, at any stage of healing, right? So that's working with whether you're doing top down and bottom up, purely top down or the bottom up, right? So if, for example, like if you know little Pedal, she's my friend's little kitten who's usually sitting on my lap or on the massage table behind me. And she got mauled by a couple of Rottweilers. And so like last night when I went to do some work on her, I didn't have to do any of the bottom up. I just purely did the top down because she was suffering from the effects of anesthetics, antibiotics, and painkillers. So if you hear what I just said, you can do it on any living creature. You can do it on a plant here, or any animals, either in person or remotely, right? So if you understand how the universal Ho'oponopono works, you can also do the universal method, even though it's primarily bottom up, and in person, you can still do it remotely with somebody if you're tuned into it enough. So the idea is you can go into it understanding that there are no limits, there are no standard answers. A lot of people get upset with what I share because they're looking for a standard approach. They're looking for a one-size-fits-all, one approach suits everybody. Like not most practitioners and most other therapies have a single protocol which they just do for everybody, right? Everything I'm sharing is the complete opposite. It's like every step that you're doing something, you have no idea what's going to come up. But if you know and understand the principles of what I'm sharing, you just have to adapt to what comes up as it comes up. And if you understand the theory of it and the philosophy of it, you have the ability to respond to that without trying to limit it to what you feel comfortable with or what you know really well. So like every time I work with somebody, I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing until it presents itself and the picture, it's like you're doing a jigsaw puzzle, but you don't know what the puzzle is. You don't know what the picture is until it's pretty well done. So if it's all about being on the leading edge of consciousness, expanding into the unknown, and literally being an instrument to whatever comes up. And any deviations away from that experience, any discrepancies within your purity and that sort of stuff will cloud or limit what you can do and what benefits the person you're doing it on can receive. So, there's a lot of people who have done a lot of other modalities, and they try to integrate what I'm sharing into what they're doing rather than integrate what they're doing into what I'm sharing. It's a very common problem. It's not a problem, but it's a challenge, because they may have spent 20 years doing, acupuncture, and they try to bring that in rather than actually trying to take on another modality where they use acupuncture if and when needed. All right. So it's a bit like what Skinner said. If the only tool you've got to hammer, everything becomes a nail. So the other thing with this is, because you're spontaneously doing it and there is no set path, there's no sort of script that you have to follow, you do have to use your own heart and listen to that to be guided. A lot of people just want a script. They just say, just write it all out and we'll just follow the script. It's the opposite to the truth, right? You need to be spontaneous. You need to listen. You need to feel and go with what comes up, right? And the more people understand the essence of what I'm sharing in my book, The Nature of Life, you'll understand that the way you get guided, if you, rather than just stick to a technique, is to use your intuition, right? So you only need things like muscle testing and whatever other modalities until you get clear enough in your intuition where you can do it without even doing much else at all. So that's not to confuse the fact where, if you are working with somebody and you've fully understood what's happening, then sometimes you actually do have to show the person's body exactly what's happening, right? So that's where, in the universal method, when we do the workshops, there is a lot of practical hands-on things where we'll see it all shortly. There's stages where we do the universal kinetics as part of the process. And when you get a muscle test, when you get a weak muscle test, the body actually registers the fact that it can identify the problem, or it can at least identify that there is a problem. And depending on what you're doing, you can show, like if it's poisons, the body can identify, oh, that's poisons. But if you're just testing something generally, you'll just see, oh, there's a weakness there. And then that means the body then opens itself up to the answer, because it always is seeking wholeness and completeness. And if you can actually show the body that there's a weakness, it opens the doorway for you to actually show what's causing the weakness, the what, when, how, where, why, and who are the weakness. And like I said, with everything I'm sharing, you're then able to determine exactly what it is that's missing and put it back. And that goes through all the three techniques: universal kinetics, universal Ho'oponopono, and universal method. The only reason why there's any state of dis-ease away from the effortlessness state of grace is that there's something missing, right? And all excesses and all overloads and everything like that is the result of what's initially missing. Because if what was missing was there, then that excess wouldn't have developed into some form of disease, right? So remember, all diseases are due to a deficiency or an excess, primarily a deficiency, right? It always starts with a deficiency. So that's what we're looking for the whole way through. So the actual outcome of any technique should be that the person is whole and complete. And you have to be ready, willing, and able to use whatever means necessary in terms of techniques, modalities, practices, in order to be able to restore that person to that state in the shortest amount of time possible. And this is another factor that comes up in the workshops, not just with Universal Method, is that people who are used to using really hyped up techniques, they like to get quick results, right? And they want to be able to do it in a session. And they say, oh, if I was just using my modality, we would have resolved that within half an hour or something. It's like, well, yes, but we're not just finding a solution to the problem, right? And yes, I could easily do that probably in 5-10 minutes as well. But what we're doing is we're actually helping the body find its way back to wholeness and completeness, having put back what was missing, not just actually solving the problem to whatever degree, right? So when you actually let the body process the healing experience in its own time and way, then it may be 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months down the track that the whole thing's healed up, right? So you can push for a quick result. It's a bit like a difference between getting stitches and letting something heal naturally, or getting the skin graft or letting something heal naturally. The idea is just let the bodies, because you're working with the body's intelligence, right? You're not working with the ego's limitations. You're not working with the belief systems of the person, right? Your intent is to be above and beyond the dualities within that person, which are then playing themselves out as whatever, physical symptoms like conditions or mental states, right? So it's your level of awareness, like I said the other night, it's your state of consciousness and your level of awareness, your level of consciousness, which determines how tuned into another person you can be as you're being of service to them. And you're not just rushing in there to get a quick result and make them think that you're wonderful and you've helped them with a problem, right? It's all about you being instrumental and being of service to that person to find the real truth of what's going on, and not just getting rid of problems and offering solutions. It's actually putting them consciously back on the path to their own purity, towards their own potential and purpose. Okay. So, so in the workshop, we go through the process differently. What I'm going to just mainly focus on tonight is, this is where you can do it for yourself and by yourself. So I will touch on what we do in the workshop, because it's actually in the worksheets. If everybody just checks their email, you'll notice that I sent you the universal method process and the worksheets. It's a 2-page document. That's what we're going to be going through shortly. So the idea is that once you know the process, you can do the whole thing for yourself and by yourself. And once you get your head around the actual the first parts of the process, then you'll know how to do it for somebody else, right? And this is where, when I say there's 75 different modalities all brought together, you don't quite get to the point where you're using all those modalities in the introduction level, right? That will come at the advanced level. And I haven't done that workshop yet, because most people are just at that beginner's level. They're still learning the language. They're still learning the process. And so in time, I'll do that, right? So on that note, the reason why I created this is because I constantly research and investigate the best of everything that's out there. And through my own experience, like within my own healing journey, I've sometimes found that it just didn't quite hit the spot. Something just didn't quite sort of reveal everything as much as I needed it to. So then I'd use, like, say, for example, if I was using Brandon Bay's technique, it might get me to a point, but then it didn't give me the turnaround experience that I needed, like what Byron Katie's work does. And then that may not have actually anchored it into my consciousness in the way that the Sedona method would. So my mind naturally works where I can put all these things together, but it's not just putting them together, it's actually the order in which you do them, right? So what I did was I studied and looked at how all the 75 different healing modalities work. And if you understand the book, right, everything's scalable. And within the material, there's the 12 divine elements, which is everything that we realize and awaken to or surrender to. Within the divine elements, there's the divine order. So there's an order in which everything has to be done, right? And whether it's a detoxification program, whether it's an education program, we're mainly focused on the order in which things have to be done, right? And I'm forever treating people, and it just happened the other day recently, where somebody's doing a detoxification process, but they haven't even energized, and there's 10 stages, and they were doing stage 5 or 6, and they hadn't even done the previous 5 stages, right? So you have to do it in the order. So the idea is to maintain the effortlessness, right? So if you don't want to put anyone through a healing crisis, doing anything physical or with their diet. In the same way with the universal method, you don't want to go dredging up shit, right? That will come up, but they'll be doing it hopefully with a top-down perspective, right? They'll be ready to actually deal with their shit, whatever comes up. Once you've actually put them into a space where they can respond to it and not get caught up in it, not actually get bogged down in it again, not slip back into, you know, the identity that they were when they actually had the trauma or whatever. So with the first part of the process, there's room for somebody else to do it with you, even if you do understand it at the beginner's level. But the complexities of it will come later, whether we either do another Zoom call on that, or it's something I might just have to leave for the workshops. So with the way it's all structured, the universal kinetics, I started putting that together in, I think it was 2002. Well, no, actually it wasn't 2002, it was 1999. But what happened in 2002 is all the material from the book I was writing, I realized I needed all the content from the book to be able to make the universal kinetics whole. It had to be the same content, right? I was writing the book, and then I had all the universal kinetics developing, and then I realized they're actually not separate, right? So that's where the book, The Nature of Life, became the theory manual for the universal kinetics. So the universal kinetics, that is a workshop, a paid workshop. It helps put food on the table in that sense. And with the sales of the books and hopefully the ongoing sales of the workshops when I actually continue to do them, that will keep me just with a roof over my head. Like I said, I'm a minimalist. I'm doing just the minimum to survive and be as productive and as giving as I can. Like I said, I'd ideally like to be able to do absolutely everything for free, and that time may come soon. Whereas in the meantime, I do charge for some of the workshops, but for the Universal Ho'oponopono and for the Universal Method, I'm going to give away all the information for free, and I'll continue to do those workshops for free or by donation, right? So it's all by donation. If there's enough people donate, then it'll give me more time to keep developing the material. And I'd like this to be as popular, if not more popular, than all the emotional freedom technique and the mainstream Ho'oponopono. So, you know, like I haven't really put much time and energy into either of them since I was last in Melbourne and Adelaide, simply because I've been in production mode as well as just having to work to keep the bills paid. So the idea is that I'm going to do a workbook for both the Universal Method and the Universal Ho'oponopono, and again, publish those for free. So within the Universal Method and the Universal Ho'oponopono book, there's going to be a theory section where I explain it all relative to what I just said before, the top down, bottom up, have those two things clearly defined, and then explain it at the different stages of competency as to how well you know it. So you can do level 2, like the advanced level of the Universal Method. Once you understand it thoroughly, you'll be able to do it on anywhere, on anyone, anywhere, at any time, for any reason, right? So like I've been in aeroplanes, you know, 10 kilometers up in the sky helping people, right? So you can do it anytime, anywhere, on anyone. And so the idea is to make that freely available to everybody. And this is now the inspiration behind both of them. Primarily the Universal Method is that when I was going through it all, I realized that there was no real structured order to it. And like, it took me a while to figure it out. I mean, I remember one night where I was just laying on my bed and I was doing the Sedona Method. I'm going, well, I'm doing something, but I really should have done Byron Katie's work first. And then I started doing it and I go, okay, well, I haven't actually really done Brandon Bay's work. So I realized, you know, that you can't really jump the gun. And that's what a lot of people do. So I know a lot of people who have just found one technique, whether it's Brandon Bay's, Byron Katie, the D Martini method, whatever, and they stick with that. But that's sort of, it's like a bandwidth, right? You've got you've got the whole spectrum. And if you're limiting yourself to one band of that spectrum and your issues somewhere else, then, you know, it's like you can keep doing, it's like pinata or pin the tail on the donkey. You may or may not eventually hit the issue, right? So what we're doing is we're creating the universal method to cover the whole bandwidth, right? So universal kinetics does that naturally, but this is where you actually have to, universal kinetics, you actually learn to do that. Whereas in the universal method, I'm trying to actually give the 24-step process in a way where you don't actually have to really intellectually learn it and all the steps, just make it like at grassroots level. So anybody can just read it and follow it without having to have read the book or have to do a weekend workshop. So I want to be able to just have it published on the internet along with a bit of a guideline for it, and then have anybody and everybody start working with it pretty well straight away. That's the theory. So the other thing that inspired this, and I've covered this in other videos, so I won't go into too much detail. I did one of the introductory talks with Mark last year in August. So that video is online. So I'll let everybody watch that for more detail. So the reason why I decided to actually do something about the universal method and to not just use it as part of the universal kinetics is to fill the gap where I know a lot of, like, again, 80% of the clients that I have and 80% of the people who come to my events are doctors, practitioners, therapists, healers, and so on. And they're often a challenge to deal with because they're sort of in some ways not stuck, but they're biased towards what they do. And a lot of the practitioners, when I say to them, but are you at peace? They say no. You know, they may have been doing Byron Katie's work for 12 years. They might have been doing Brandon Bay's work for 20 years. But because like I said before, they're only operating in a particular bandwidth as to where that modality works. They can't expand their consciousness to accommodate the whole spectrum, right? So I created the universal method using all the different modalities. A lot of the modalities are at the higher end of that spectrum, right? But a lot of the modalities, just like the ones that we're going to cover shortly, they're at the lower end of the spectrum, which you don't really need to do a workshop or anything like that to get your head around. You can just sort of explain it in a couple of sentences and move on. So that's the theory of that. So once you actually go through the universal method at the beginner's level, then it primes you ready to learn all the modalities, universal kinetics, universal method, and universal Ho'oponopono at an even deeper level. And as you get to know it at a deeper level, that's when you can start bringing in all the subtle modalities. Like you can use NLP at any time. You can use Reiki at any time. You can do all those things at any time. But when you get to know the material, then you'll know when and how to bring in all the other modalities. Yeah. And the more you know universal kinetics when you're actually working with somebody, the more effective you can do the universal method with as well. So has everybody got their worksheets up on the computer? So I'll share the screen here anyway. Make sure I don't end up with a green mustache. So I'm going to share the screen and I'll go through the process with everybody. Oh, sorry, somebody just wants to join the call. Had a lot of people getting in the very last minute and I was running late as well. So I don't like people missing out if, okay, it's all right. All righty. Okay, so you've disabled the sharing again there, Mark.
Zoom did. No, you should be good now.
Okay. All right, any questions so far before I move on?
I think it's probably actually easier if people read off the screen, because then they can, rather than trying to bring up two things on the on their own device, depending on what they're watching on.
Yeah, true. So how clear is that, Mark?
Crystal.
Perfect. All right, so I'm just going to zoom out a bit. What we're going to cover is there's 24 steps to this, right? And actually, I might just talk you through it to start with, just so as you know where we're going, to give you an overview of it all. Is that still fair enough, Mark?
I can read it. Others may have a little bit of...
No, it's all right. Well, I'll just show this. So that's the 2 sheets that I emailed everybody.
Yep.
So I'll just go through the 24 steps, explain what they do, and then I'll go through them in detail. So the first step is clearing, right? So first of all, we make sure the person's clear, which means they're open and receptive, and then we connect them to what's missing. And then we start to address what issues they're dealing with in their lives. Then we get to them to notice and observe how that's impacting on their life once they actually pinpoint what's going on. And then we get them to do a reality check. And then what we do is we take whatever they're dealing with and we amplify it or magnify it just to give them a full hard look at what's going on. Then we find out where that is in relation to their leading edge, what their highest truth is. And then once they connect with that, then they can see what it is that they're stuck in the past in terms of what payoffs they've got going on. And then we get them to either release what's going on or realize what's going on, right? And then we get them to the point where they're free of all that, and then we can turn their energies around and get them going in the direction they ultimately want. And then we confirm that they are aligned and connected to what they ultimately want, where they're going. And then we see the consequences of what would have happened if that situation never arose. So we look at it, okay, well, that was bad, but where would you be if that never happened? And the main inspiration of that is where people say, that accident was the best thing that ever happened to me, right? So they're looking at it in a different light. And then we get them to transition, so their perspective, and then we get them to affirm their new perspective, and then we do the whole Ponopono, where we look back and just honor everything for what it was. Then we do a resolution, which means that person's completely resolved. There's no trace or residue of anything left. And then we affirm the empowerment that comes with that. And then we put closure on it all in terms of that's everything we've done's done and dusted. And then we embrace, and then we reconcile the whole story, the fact that now that they're back on their path, why they had to go through the whole process in the first place. And then we complete the whole process, and then we honor everything that person's now got, and then we honor the fact that they're ready to go through the next level of growth, which is the transformation, and then we anchor that state into them. And they've got all guns blazing on, firing in all cylinders, okay? So that's the 24 steps. So what we'll do is, just as an introduction, we'll go through them all. And so far, so good. So the first one, I'm not sure how big is the video that you've got there on screen, Mark?
I've got steps 1 to 5, and I'm on my MacBook, so I can read that perfectly.
No, sorry, the window, is it big enough that you can see me?
You can.
It minimized too small.
No, it just seems to be the recording that does that, Brian. So while it's live, it's bigger, but I'm not sure why it when we watch the recording back, why it's smaller like that. But
okay,
yeah.
Alrighty. So I will physically demonstrate the practical parts of this as we go. Okay, so I'll just make that slightly bigger. Okay, so all right, so step 1, the clearing. So use any modality. Okay, so I'll explain some of the language as we go. If you have any modality in your toolkit, whether it's EFT, NLP, Reiki, massage, whatever, you're often asked to do whatever you need to do to get the person clear. And what I mean clear is, things don't always go according to plan to people getting to your place on time. And they might turn up all stressed because they got 10 minutes late in traffic, right? So they're already stressed and they're panicking and they're feeling bad about being late. So you can instantly clear that. Or, if you're the first on the scene of an accident, you can just do the clearing to actually help resolve the shock and the trauma, right? And, if somebody turns up at your door and they've just been raped or whatever, this is the clearing. This is like the first aid step, right? So it's just to calm all the energies down and start to redirect them in the direction they need to go, right? A lot of the time I act out that little kid who's all fidgety and they can't sort of sit still and they're rocking and, that sort of stuff. So what we want to do is just calm them down and then just get them to focus their energies inwards, right? But it's a bit like saying to somebody who's hysterical, just calm down. That doesn't help, right? It usually just makes things worse. So the universal method's first thing is just to meet the person for where they're at. And the more modalities you've got, the quicker and easier it is for you to be able to determine how to get the person clear of, the immediate stress and the shock and the emotional charge that they present with. So when it says use any modality, that's anything that right? So if somebody turns up at the door and they're in shock because they've just been raped, then you can step in and just do NLP. You can do any modality at all just to get them to just breathe their way through it, right? So if you don't know any modalities, then the universal method, the process of clearing will at least offer you something to offer them, okay? So use any modality or the following method to dissolve current issues and emotions and terminate any programs or stories running, right? So, if a person turns up late and they're apologetic and they're all frustrated and angry and they say, oh, look, I'm always late. Doesn't matter what I do, I'm always late. So then you can say, okay, we'll just take a seat and let's just relax. And like, you can just, you don't let a person ramble on, right? The first thing is you get the person to just stay silent, right? Just be silent. So in that sense, you have to be a bit commanding just to actually stop them from digging a hole. It's just making matters worse. And that I always say, the Scientologists have actually got that part right. Just stay silent, right? So, if you do a treatment, don't try to actually describe and explain too much of what's happening. That's just what's happened. That just breaks the silence. Just let the energies process on that subtle level, right? So the way you do the clearing, and if you've got somebody with you, I'll explain how you can do it with somebody else. There are a lot of subtleties here. So if you're a male, you primarily use your right hand and put that across your forehead, and you put the left hand across the back of your occiput, right? So ideally, as with yoga and everything like that, you should be able to sit up straight, right, with your back unsupported, with the top of your head going to the center of the universe, and then with good posture, and then you can always keep your chin up. This is all part of the Adata meditation as well. And you do it with your eyes closed, right? So the reason why you do it with your eyes closed is because that takes away the primary external to internal input, right? And those of you that understand the neurological component, a person can march perfectly well with their eyes open, but if you get them to close their eyes, a lot of people will go homolateral, right? Because they're relying on external stimulation for a reference point. That's essentially what they're doing, right? So if you get a person to close their eyes, you're actually getting them to go inwards, and that's where you want to take them. You want to go inwards to the actual seat of the issue that you're dealing with, right? So if you put a smile on your face, that instantly diffuses the emotional charge around something, right? There's a there's a saying in South India, you know, if you're walking along and you trip over and fall and your friends and relatives don't laugh, they're not your true friends and relatives, because they're taking things too personally and seriously, right? So this is a way of restoring the lightheartedness to things, and we will go more into that later, right? So actually, no, I'll explain it now. The way you know somebody's actually healed and fully recovered from a shock or a trauma is when they can actually laugh about it, right? So what you're doing is, if you know that's the end result, that where a person expresses liberation or like freedom from the stress and the trauma, then why not bring it into the start, right? Even though, you know, if somebody's just been raped, this is where you have to use some discretion as well, right? There's no point getting them to do a smile on their face. Don't override the reality of the trauma, right? But you can get them to at least sit up straight and do this for them, right? So when you're clear enough within yourself, you can do this for yourself by yourself, right? But as soon as you lose what I talk about, you know, that connection, and if you're not feeling, you know, the state of grace, that's when it's best to actually have somebody else do it for you, right? And according to the whole flow of the yin and yang and everything, it's better to always have a female working on a male and a male working on a female. That just helps the flow of energy between the masculine and feminine and that sort of thing, right? So if you're a male, you put your right hand over the forehead and left hand at the back. If you're female, it's the other way around. And this is where in the workshop I go into all the subtleties. I won't go too much into it tonight. But if you're dealing with a male who's just like real alpha, real macho, you know, that sort of stuff, then this is masculine energy, right? So you don't want to actually intensify or increase that energy. You want to get them to put their left hand over the forehead, right? Just to introduce some of the yin female energy. And the same way, if a woman's all, you know, a blubbering mess, right? You don't want to put her left hand there. You want to get her right hand there to actually bring out the masculine strengths within her as well, right? So that's a subtlety. So this is where, if they're an absolute mess, you do it for them, right? If a person's not altogether clear, then if you're a female and you're working on a male, you can get them to put their hands like this, and then you can put your hands on top of their hands, right? I won't go into all the subtleties of how and why this works, but it's primarily an energy shifting between the front and back part of the brains. The front part of the brain is reasoning. The back part of the brain is all the coordination and the visual centers. So what you're doing is you're using the natural bioelectrics of the body, right? And I demonstrate this in the events. You can actually physically demonstrate the flow of energy between male and female, and between the left. If you hold a multimeter with an electrode left and right, there's voltage going through your body, right? So you're actually using the bioelectric energy to reset the brain, and the bioelectrics, the bioenergetics, and the quantum element of the brain as well, right? So remember, in all the material I talk about the 6 levels of communication. So there's the lymph, blood, nerves, meridian, chakras, and the quantum level, or the bioelectrics, bioenergetics, and the quantum, right? So by doing this, there's reflexes in the head for the lymph and the blood and the nerves, as well as when you're contacting somebody like this, the bioelectrics and the bioenergetics and the quantum's also there, right? Bioelectrics is when you're touching somebody. Bioenergetics is when you're not. That's like Reiki, when you're not actually physically touching them. But when you can still do Reiki as you're touching them, okay? But this is like doing all 6. This is like more doing the Reiki and the quantum when it's not contacting, right? And there's appropriate times for doing that. If I'm working in a Muslim country where I have to keep touching to a woman to a minimum, I can do the whole thing without touching them, right? So that's where we get into all the subtleties, and I go into more detail of that in the workshops, right? So if you're working with somebody and you want to go to the next level and you're feeling trapped or blocked or stuck, then that's a good time to actually go to a female practitioner if you're a male, and if that person's tuned in, they can put their right hand on your head and this, right? Because if you've done your best and you're still feeling limited in what you're doing, there's no point putting more of your energy in. It's better to actually have some outside input, right? So a good example of that is where, like I could tell you a million stories for each one of these steps, but I'll try to keep it to a short time tonight. One of my friends is a yoga instructor. And when she was going through yoga instructor training, they were doing like a forward bend, just sitting on the floor. And she wasn't able to get past a certain part, just bending forwards. And what happened was her yoga instructor walked past and just rested her hand on her back. And with that, she just energetically shifted and she just flopped all the way forward to the point where she could put her head down on her thighs and knees, right? And if you think about how and why that happened, right? And these are the subtleties that have made me put all this together, right? Like I said, this is all going to be part of the stories that I put into the book that accompanies this, this process. So if a person's energetics are blocked, and it's a bit like you can only see as far as your headlights, right? If somebody else comes along energetically and they're stronger and they expand your energetic vision, then you can actually see where you're missing the point, or you can see where the accesses are, and that energy is redirected to where it should be, and you naturally go into that flexible state, right? So, so when you're limited, it's best to get external help. It's not that you can't do it yourself. It's this is where you're living the truth in the fact that no man is an island, right? Like I said, the true meaning of life is to have fun. The purpose of life is to share the fun. This is fun. It's like sometimes you just want to sit and do a puzzle together. So you're not taking this personally or seriously. You're just sitting there and you're solving the puzzles of life. You're meeting the challenges of life with somebody who's able to love you unconditionally in the healing process and not make it personal or serious, right? But at the same time, they're really willing and able to deal with whatever extremes of things are going to come out. Like you might go there and just say to somebody, oh, look, I'm having financial difficulties. And you might go there for something that's, you know, maybe not too severe, right? But all of a sudden, when you get through the process, it might be going back to the fact that you were sexually abused when you were a toddler, right? So this is where when you go through this process, it's not going to bring up anything that you're not going to be capable of handling, right? You have to honor the process, because like a lot of times, if you start dealing with something and all of a sudden something bigger than what you feel capable of handling comes up, then what do? Right? So in this case, if you ever start to feel like you've bitten off more than you can chew, or you're not able to handle it, the answer is very simple. Go back to the start, right? All you have to do is more of the previous step, or go back to the start and just just calm everything down again, right? So again, we're not in a race. We're not in a rush to get through this whole step, right? So if you're working with somebody, just so as you understand this, right? If you're working with somebody, you might only get to the 7th stage of this 7th step of this process in the first session with somebody. That might be enough, right? I don't think I've ever got through all 24 steps with somebody in the first time, right? So this is where it's all part of the divine time and part of the pace of grace, right? Yes, there's people that I've been working with for a long time. When I say I've never done it the first time with anybody, the all step, that's with somebody who doesn't really know the material, right? Somebody who knows the material, you could probably go through all 24 steps in about 20 minutes, half an hour. Right, but for somebody who's only just new to all this, you can't just pick them up and, you know, from one end of the spectrum and put them at the other end of the spectrum. Theoretically and philosophically, yeah, that'd be lovely, but that's in reality, it's not the way things go. And to get into the metaphysical reasons as to why, it's because this is not to heal somebody. This is not for you to go in there and do their jigsaw puzzle for them. This is to actually turn their light on so they can solve their issues themselves, right? You're just facilitating in their healing, and you facilitate to the minimum. The whole idea of the universal method is they do the work, you're just there to guide them, at each step, and make sure that each step is done thoroughly and as complete as you can before you move to the next step without rushing into it, right? Because like I said, you might spend half an hour just going through the first 2 or 3 steps, right? And then you might take another half hour just getting through the third one. And then after that, that's enough, right? Just bringing up stuff might be enough. But and then if you've given them the technique to go away and do the processing, the clearing, that could be enough to get somebody just turned around and facing in the right direction energetically in that, right? It's just to diffuse the situation might be enough. Then the next time you could maybe easily just skip through the whole lot and finish the whole thing in 20 minutes, right? So again, there's no standard answer. There's no standard approach. Everything's individual. And this is where, again, a lot of people get pissed off with me and think I'm too intellectual or too complicating things too much. No, it's the opposite. I'm simplifying it. Just take it as it comes. Be humble, right? Be patient, and just let it's the equivalent of just trying to pull on a seedling as it's growing. Just let it grow. Just make sure it's the path around it's clear for it to grow, that there's no obstacles. That's all you're doing. It reminds me of that Winter Olympics game where there's, they have that thing sliding along. I don't know what it's called, but they clear the path of it and they make it try to slide faster and further. I don't know what. Curling, yeah, that thing, right? So what you're doing is you're facilitating in them finding their own way, right? They present a jigsaw puzzle and they are all upset that all the pieces are still cardboard side up, or they might be the other extreme where they've got one piece that they can't find amongst it all and they seriously want to find that one piece, right? So you have to accommodate people anywhere within the spectrum and at any stage of their puzzle. They're solving the puzzle. You're not there to actually do the puzzle for them, right? So this process, when you're doing it for yourself and by yourself, it's going to help you recover, like I said, all those energies going off in all places. It's just to retrieve all those energies and refocus and redirect them towards it's like if you've got a light bulb and it's shining in all directions, if you concentrate those light rays and send it in one beam, it'll shine further in that sense, right? So the idea is to actually focus all your energies on your path, and then you'll be able to take steps down that path and deal with things as they come up. Not try to look ahead, not try to sort of rush into the whole process. Just take it as it comes, okay? So still at stage 1, right? So stage 1 clearing, you put your hands over your forehead and across the back of the head, chin up slightly, big smile on your face, and then you breathe below the navel, right? I'm not going to go into the breathing tonight. Everybody can listen back at other videos where I talk about that. So again, I've got female, the left hand, male, the right palm across the forehead and the occiput, right? So your contact is either by the facilitator or the recipient or both, right? So if somebody turns up and they're traumatized, they probably shouldn't even be doing this because their energies are just going to put in, all the stress, right? So just get them to relax and put their palms flat down on their thighs and just slow the breathing down. So again, the more that you understand the 12 factors of breathing in this stage, the better, right? So I explained this in the Adata meditation one. The way to calm a person down is to get them to breathe out as deep as they can and then breathe in as slowly as they can and breathe out as slowly as they can, right? That's the way to get a person to calm down the quickest possible way, right? So if you look at it, that's breathing below the navel. So if you go to the other extreme where they're panicking and breathing in their throat like this, right? The opposite is what you need to do. As slow in as you can and slow out as you can, right? That helps them. It's not regain control of themselves. It just puts them back into their natural state of ease, okay? So, hey, Mark, if you think of anything I need to add at any stage, just jump in, yeah?
All good.
So we'll go to the second step. If we keep going at this rate, we'll be here at midnight tonight.
It'll turn into a 2-day workshop live.
Yeah. All right. So having calmed the person down, and again, a lot of the time this is very calming for the facilitator as well, because it forces them to be in the supernatural state. So just to clarify this, right? Because a lot of people may not have seen what I'm about to say. What I talk about is going to all your internal reference points on the highest level of your being, right? So if I say to you, if you can step through a doorway into heaven and you're a supernatural, divine supernatural being, that's the energy that you bring in. Nothing else other than that. You don't stand there doing the clearing on somebody as a Reiki master or an NLP practitioner or a kinesiologist. No, you're nothing else other than a divine instrument channeling the divine essence, right? So you put yourself into that state of being nothing more than an instrument. And what you're doing is you're restoring that person's sense of truth back to the point where they realize that they don't need to have a story. There shouldn't actually really even be a self to be traumatized, just to be instrumental to the moment and respond rather than actually feed into the reactions of all the past belief systems and everything, right? The stories running in their head. So that's where you're coming from within yourself as you do this, right? And that's the actual end result of it is that we all return back to our supernatural divine state, empowered with our full access to our creativity, and we can get on with having some fun and sharing it, okay? So the second stage, that's to align and connect to the presence and purpose within the here and now, right? So what I'm about to share with you is something that most people have never, ever experienced, right? And I'm not saying that again out of ignorance or arrogance or being one up or superior, right? When I do a simple test, and this is something that I teach in the workshop, you stand with if that's shoulder width apart, where's the camera? If that's shoulder width apart, you actually test that far apart, right? Not this far apart. There's a particular width apart that you'll see in the workshop. You do a muscle test at that width apart. A person can either hold that or they can't. If they can't hold it, it means they don't have any conscious connection to who they are, right? So what we're doing is we're putting back what's missing in terms of their connection to their true self, not who they think they are, not who they believe they could be or should be or would be, but who they truly are as a conscious soul, as a sovereign being, right? So the test, you don't need to actually do the muscle testing unless you're able to self-test with kinesiology or you have somebody there to facilitate in it. You can do this without a practitioner, right? So the muscle testing is just that, and you test arms horizontal to the floor, thumbs up in the air, thumbs up like this, and eyes open. So the first thing is you test with the eyes closed. Why? Because when you test with the eyes closed, you're asking the person, can you connect with your true self? And you'd be surprised how many people just don't have that connection. So you test it with the eyes open, eyes closed, then eyes open, right? If they're weak on both, that person's not able to truly connect. Like I said, talk about being able to align and then connect. This is the connection, right? So the clearing clears everything out of the way so things can connect, right? So that's the actual physical test when you're working with somebody else. If you're not in the presence of somebody else that can facilitate it, what you do is you use 2 fingers of your right hand if you're male, or 2 fingers of your left hand if you're female, or you can use your whole hand, right? At least 2 fingers. Don't never just use one. It's either 2 fingers or all 5 fingers. I prefer to use all 5 fingers, right? So the reason why, again, is bioelectrically, all the meridians and all the energies flow out your fingertips. And again, this is all scientifically provable. So what you're doing is you're consciously using that energy to activate this is contacting on your thymus gland. So the point's right here. If you run your fingers from this notch here in your throat down your rib cage, you'll find at one point there's a little bump, right? You're tapping on that bump right there. Right, some people's it's really pronounced, some people's it's not. And just remember, if you're doing this with somebody else and there's a female, then you're obviously tapping somewhere near their breasts. So just always say, look, I need to tap a point here, or they do it themselves, right? Again, if a person's traumatized, you do the tapping, right? if they've already come out of the clearing, right? Ultimately, if everybody comes out of the clearing, they should be able to tap themselves. But sometimes during the clearing, if you know the material well enough, you can do the tapping, right, on their thymus gland as they're doing the clearing themselves, right? So again, like, you can use everything in combination. There's no standard answer. So what you do is you tap on the thymus gland while saying your full name, right? So just beneath that notch, that little bump on your sternum, is your thymus gland, which is your one of the master organs for your immune system. It also happens to be the metaphysical seat of your sense of self and like a soul connection. It's not like a bioelectrical soul connection thing, right? So what you do is if you've tested weak with your eyes open and or closed, right? So if you're doing it with somebody, you test with your eyes closed, right? And if it tests weak, you have to go through the whole thing with your eyes closed. So what you do is, with either left or right hand, you tap on your thymus gland while saying your full name. So if I tested weak with my eyes closed, I would go Brian Gerard Schaefer, right? But then you don't just go Brian Gerard Schaefer. You just say it consciously on the out breath, right? So remember, we're staying mindful of the breath the whole way through this. So you say hold, it goes weak. So you get the person to take a big deep breath in. Again, looking up to the third eye, if you know the data, keep your chin up the whole time with a smile on the face, right? So the smile on the face never shifts. So smile on the face, eyes turned up and in, chin up, big smile, and you're saying your name slowly on the out breath, Brian Gerard Schaefer, right? And you can also, going into the subtleties of it, there's four phases of the breath: breathe in, hold it, breathe out, hold it, right? So you can say the name Brian Gerard Schaefer while holding the breath out. You can't really breathe in and talk unless you're Icelandic or Finnish. I think the Finnish people breathe on the in-breath, do they, Marco? Anyway, so then you say hold it. I mean, you hold the breath in, and then you can say it on the out breath. You can say it to yourself when holding the breath in. You can say it to yourself while you breathe out in, and you can say it when you breathe out. Right. So you can verbalize it on the holding the breath out, Brian Gerard Schaefer. I can say it to myself when I breathe in, say it to myself when I hold it, say my name out on the out breath, Brian Gerard Schaefer, right? If a person's completely blown out, what you do is you get them to do a square wave breath, and you tap on their thymus gland for them, and you say their name out loud, right? And depending on the worse they get, the more you intervene and the more you do for them, right? So the next one is if they say their name on all four phases of the breath and then you retest, right? If that's not clear, then you do a Reiki or heart rub, right? Depending on, if you've got a woman who's got big breasts, you don't go rubbing, you just do Reiki on the area. There's a point between the third and fourth rib to the left side, and you put all 5 fingers in a row, flat like this, right? And you just rest it there. And depending on whether it's appropriate to rub or not, you just rub, and you do the rub again, saying their name for them if they're really blown out, or you say your own name on all phases of the breath, or you can say it just quietly to yourself, or say it out loud. It's actually best to say it out loud as much as you can, right? So again, you only do it for them if you don't think they've got the real connection. You can still go through, they may not be fully clear, but they may be able to fully connect once this process starts, okay? Okay, so it's been a while since I've done this, so to get my head around it again. So when you do it, if you're doing the actual with somebody, you can actually test whether you do the left or right hand, right? So if you know it's a person who's got ego problems as a male, female problems as a female, like I said, There's no point getting a right hand on an alpha male things, right? So there's no point doing a right hand tap. You get them to do their left hand, right? It's the sweeter, gentler yin aspect, right? So the same thing if you're facilitating. If you've got an alpha male, you would use your right hand for female tap. You'd use all your feminine energy to tap it in onto their thymus gland, or to do what I call the heart plug, which is here on the rib cage, right? Always, if you can do it on contacting the skin, that maximizes the bioelectrical activation, right? Like I said about that yoga person, just resting your hand there makes a connection, right? It actually radiates through it. If you stick a pin in somebody's toe, their whole body jumps, right? So if you touch a person, every cell in their body, either directly or indirectly, gets that energy and gets that information flowing into them, okay? So again, no straight answer whether you use your left or right hand, or whether you do it for them, or whether they both do it, right? So you might do the heart plug while they do the tapping, right? Again, you have to use your creativity, right? So the same thing, so the tapping is either left or right hand, the heart plug's either left or right hand. It's either you, the facilitator, or both, right? So now I've got a note there. If weak on eyes, closed, open, both, or neither, right? So if a person's weak on both of them, or one or both, you do that, right? I normally just get a person to test eyes closed and eyes open, right? If it's weak on both, then you know you're dealing with a deeper issue, right? If they're fine with the eyes closed, then you know they've got a sense of self. They haven't lost soul connection, right? If they have trouble holding it with their eyes open, you know that they can't express themselves into the world. So it gives you a bit of a heads up as to where they're going with, or what's going on, right? They can be weak on both of them or neither. What happens if they're weak on neither, right? Go to the next step, right? But at the same time, depending on how well you know the muscle testing, they could be jammed. And that's what I show in the workshop, is how to work out whether it's a false positive or whether it's a jam and that sort of thing. All right. So far, so good. Did I leave anything out there, Mark?
Absolutely very thorough and covering it all, I think.
Excellent. All right. So step 3. This is where it gets quite complicated, and I won't go into too much detail.
I will just interrupt just really quick. Sorry, Brian. I'll just interrupt really quickly. Catherine did ask earlier about what do you mean by a weak? Obviously, without being taught the muscle testing and so forth, it's a little bit hard to demonstrate when you don't have someone else there to demonstrate. But that's a kinesiology and muscle testing thing. Yeah,
hopefully I explained that clear enough to the point where you can do it without the muscle testing. But again, the universal method is ideally done with somebody else facilitating it, purely because, like I said, we're here to have fun, but the truth is magnified when we're sharing it, right? So if you can share the journey and not just, most people just want to share their stories when they go and get healed, right? This is to actually awaken them to the journey of life, not just to comfort their, I call it fluffing their pillows. You're not there to fluff anyone's pillows, right? But, this is where, I have to make a conscious effort to use the non-violent communication with this sort of stuff, rather than saying, just wake up, well, you have to just say, well, there's another way we can look at that, So I'm getting better at that. So the idea is just gently, right? I saw somebody today and I could just dish it to them on the chin. They were one of the most exceptional people I've ever treated. And it was like 2 hours of just me doing speedball on them. And they just walked out of here blissed out. So that was magnificent. So again, everybody's individual. They might present tough as nails, but you start this whole process and they'll just melt. They'll have a big meltdown, right? Otherwise, they'll have a meltdown and then you'll realize that it's just it's a superficial thing, and you'll uncover the giant within them, right? So the idea is just for tonight, I want to really focus on doing it for yourself by yourself, right? Those of you that have done it, I'm just clarifying the actual thing for the people who have already done the workshop. Okay, so step 3, I'm not going to go too much into this, because if you really want to know and understand the depths of what happens at this stage, I'd suggest you go and watch some or, a lot of Byron Katie's work, right? This is where this is purely Byron Katie's work. Everything before this is purely my own invention, creation. But I just know from experience, it's very hard to get somebody to go into this third step without having gone through the previous ones, right? It's okay if you're a master of doing the Byron Katie's work and you've got Byron Katie's personality. I don't have Byron Katie's personality, so I have to actually, use the previous steps to get a person open to doing the next step, right? A lot of people would go to Byron Katie already knowing who she is and everything, right? This is dealing with people who know nothing about anything, and this is where they can walk in the door not knowing what to expect, and you just gently guide them through it. So this step is where you actually start addressing what issues are going on. And remember, what issues they present with may not be what comes up, and what comes up may have nothing to do with what they present with. So if they come say, well, I want to go with, they may not even know what the issues are. There's this, I've got a blockage, I don't know what it is, right? But if they know, oh yeah, I've got a blockage around this, then what comes up may have nothing to do with that facet of life. Those of you that know the material, it might be something completely different, another facet of their life and another level of being, right? So again, I'll just read through this, right? So you actually ask them the first step of this, first question within the third step is the experience. Who or what upsets you, right? And then you ask why, right? So this is where if somebody says, my mother upsets me, then the next question will be, and why is that, right? Recall a specific situation where that occurs, and then the initial one. So when do you first remember being upset by your mum, right? Or what upsets you? The fact that the fact that it always rains when I do something like that, right? So why does it upset you? When do you because I was looking forward to playing soccer when I was a kid and it rained, and I've been angry at the weather ever since. It's the weird things that come up, right? So just remember, no one person's ever going to be the same as you go through this. Like I said, the person I saw today, she was so exceptional that I got through so much material with her than I'll probably have done with some people I've known for a couple of years, right? Yeah. So there's no one ever the same. So this is where the more you go through this, the first thing is that you have to be willing to practice this on yourself, go through it, familiarize yourself with it, at least do it a few times yourself, and then work with it with somebody who's equally open to doing it, like if you've got your partner or something. And the more you go through it, it will build your confidence and help you understand the randomness of it. That's what freaks most people out about everything I share, is the randomness of it. But you have to be comfortable with not being comfortable, right? The Tibetans call it the wisdom of insecurity. You've got no idea what's coming up, but just relax. You'll be able to deal with it. You'll be equipped to be able to handle it, right? So if you say to somebody, who or what upsets you, you have to be ready to take anything, right? My father was raping me from the age of 3 to 14. It's like, how do you respond to that? Are you equipped for that, right? So that's where you actually ask what's happening. And then you ask, in this situation, how do you want either themselves or the other person or the situation to change? And then that's what the X is. And what do you want yourself, the person or the situation to be able to do, right? So then the advice is, in this situation, what advice would you offer yourself or the other person, right? And the quote would be, say for example, if it's your mother should or shouldn't do this, right? And then the next one is needs. For you to be at peace in this situation, remember, peace is always capitalized, that this is where you're honoring the divine nature of it. For you to be at peace in this situation, what do you want, need, or require yourself or the other person to think, do, say, or feel, right? And again, I'm not going to go into the details and the variations of all that. If you look at Byron Katie, she's really good at this. And then what do you think, the fifth one is, what do you think of yourself or the other person in this situation? And then you make a list of what that person thinks or feels. I should really write or feels, yeah. Then the omission is, what is it about this person or situation do you not ever want to experience again, right? So, say dealing with a veterinarian who's just wanting to rip you off. I don't ever want to feel ripped off again. Yeah, I don't ever want to feel that I'm powerless because they're using their authority within their environment to actually control the situation. All that sort of stuff, right? So that's about as much as I can go into that. Like I said, I would recommend anybody who's interested in the depths of that to do watch Byron Katie's work. I do go more into detail during the event, right? And
I posted the link to her website in the chat box before, so
all right, excellent.
People can check it out.
So when we do the workshops, we actually take people through the whole process, so you get to see firsthand how it works. The fourth one, identify the core thoughts and feelings that arise or arose in the situation, right? So you do either arising now or arose in the past in the situation, and you determine whether it is a trapped emotion or an unexpressed quality. And this is one of the major things that came up when I was doing Brandon Bay's work, right? If you know Brandon Bay's work, you tune into where you feel and where you experience something within the body or your energy field, and then you give it a shape or a form, or you just describe the sensation. You go into it, you find the core. If you go into it and you find the actual energy, you go right into the core of that, and then you find the root of what's going on, the real what, when, how, where, why, and who of the situation. And then you go through it and out the other side, and you keep going out the other side till there's love, light, and life. And so when you do that, you're really only dealing with the dualities. Is this a negative thing, or it's mainly just negative things? But what I found when I was doing it, this is what happened when I was meditating in India. It wasn't just all the injuries in my body that I'd had when I was young and stupid. It was all this unexpressed divinity that was just wanting to burst out of me, right? So I spent most of the time just more or less just freeing and liberating all the divinity within me. I wasn't going into the pain in my back while I was sitting there going, now, what was the cause of that, and how do I feel emotionally? It was like, no, I had this freaking creative force that was just wanting to burst out of me. And in the absence of that creative flow, I went into a self-destructive pattern and broke my back. Right? It's either creative or it's destructive. So in compensation for all that creativity, it had to go somewhere. So I broke my back when I was 16 and a half in a BMX accident, right? So, and that BMX accident was the turning point for me being forced to redirect the energy into something creative, right? So again, the best thing that ever happened. So when you get to this fourth thing, you just notice, right? In this issue makes me think, this issue makes me feel, right? So you just close your eyes, imagine, sensing the experience when it happened and sensing the experience of how it makes you feel now, and just see how it makes you think, see how it makes you feel. And it may feel like just a pure divine quality. Like it might be just like you wanting to express your strength. It may be you wanting to express your love towards something, right? So, if you have a pet die when you're younger, right, that being upset is mainly, it could be not just the fact that you've lost the pet, but you've also lost the opportunity to express love to something that was close to you, right? So it may be where that the flow of the natural divinity got sort of somehow truncated, right? So the fifth one, reality. Now, determine if the situation is or was a reality, or misinterpretation or an interpretation of the situation, or a construct, right? So this hasn't really come up with me too much with myself or my clients, but a lot of people say, oh, I was raped when I was 14. Okay, so you have to determine whether it really happened or not in a subtle way, right? So you just say, okay, so was it an actual physical contact? Oh no, they never actually touched me. Oh, okay, so what did they do? They actually just exposed themselves to me. Oh, okay. So, some people, I actually just watched or listened to a really good TED talk earlier, how the past is often misconstrued, right? So if it's a past thing, you ask the first thing, was it real? And or is it happening? Is it real or is it happening? So was it, if they're dealing with the past, was it real? Or if it's present, is it real? Is it happening? Right? Is it real? As in, is it just real? Is it a real thing? Can you actually experience it, or is it just an imagining or a memory? Right? So this is where a person may have misinterpreted something, and this comes up a lot with Byron Katie when she's doing her courses, where she has somebody on stage with her. 90% of the time, when you're dealing with somebody who's belligerent, they've just completely misinterpreted something, or they're limiting their interpretation to what they perceive. And when you expand their perceptions of something, it's, it gives them the whole idea of this is to change a person's perspective and approach to what they're dealing with within themselves or in their life. And so they can not have all the emotional charges around it, but it gives them an opportunity to redirect that energy back onto their true path, and everything will just dissolve. It's like darkness disappearing in the light. So that's what you're facilitating in, right? If there's anything that takes away the peace, it's not real and it's not true, right? So there's something missing where if they were a supernatural being. So just to give you a reference point as to where we're coming from, right? If you were a supernatural being and you went back through all the experience that you've had, and you were invincible, you were indomitable, and so on, if you were in that state, how would you have interpreted it, right? Even if somebody did violate you, right? How would you feel if you were Archangel Michael, right? How would you feel if you were Jesus, whatever, or the Buddha, right? So we're not spiritually bypassing it. We're just, you wouldn't say that to somebody, if you were Jesus and you got raped, how would you feel? Well, that's not appropriate. But the idea is to actually get to the point where you are Christ-like or Buddha-like, and you can send the love and compassion, which is all the universal whole, Ponopono, which is the latest step, right? So you get to the point where you're transcendent of the being or the identity that was violated, okay? So, so you ask, did it actually happen, right? Or is it imagining or a memory of something that wasn't right? Or if it's an imagining, it's a projection, will it happen, right? How do you know it's going to happen, sort of thing? Is it or was it a reality, memory, or imagining, right? So that's pretty basic, that step. So the next step, amplification or magnification. If it's a divine experience, if it's a true experience, you amplify it, you magnify it. If it's a dualistic experience, you amplify it, right? So determine the effects of amplifying the state or the fruits of magnifying a conscious state, the dualistic state, right? So if somebody said to me, I get extremely pissed off when I'm having to deal with this situation. All right. So if you could take all that frustration, anger, being pissed off, if you could just amplify it, right? If, it's like somebody says, oh, I'm so pissed off, I could just, knock his head off at the moment. Okay. So imagine you just go up there and knock his head off. How do you feel? Right? Just throw a grenade at him. Just give full expression. It's almost, what you're doing is you're almost allowing the creativity to pour forth in a destructive way, just to diffuse it. And essentially, this is where you do it with Brandon Bay's work as well. You go into it and you see it in its pure expression. Even the most evil thing, you give it pure expression without judging it, without having to label it or anything like that, right? So whatever the emotion is, you amplify it and give it pure expression. What would you do if you could go in and talk to your boss and just tell him exactly what you think? What would you say? If you could just do whatever you could, what would you do? You amplify it. right? But then if it's a conscious thing, what would you do if you magnified it to the point where you were supernatural and you can just explode into the infinite and the eternal, right? So the question is, what would be the result if it's dualistic, or the outcome if it's conscious? If you fully expressed those energies, what would the energies be, or what would they do, right? Both either dualistic result energies or divine energies. Okay, so the seventh one is you determine if the actions and thoughts are in line with the highest and purest truth available, right? So if somebody says, I'd just like to go in and knock my boss's head off, he's such an asshole, right? Okay, so you extrapolate out of them what they're thinking and feeling, and then you ask them, so if you were to do that, I actually asked them, what's the highest, purest truth that you're aware of right now, right? I should really put that in there. So I just say to a person, like, once you get to that point, I say, if you actually just look up at the very top page of this, it's actually got the date on it, which is May. Oh, no, this actually isn't even the one. Huh. Okay. So I haven't got the right one. So there's one that's May 2020. So I'll keep updating this on the website, and I just created a Facebook page today to have this as a landing page. So I'll update any changes along the way. Like, I'll continually refine this over as time goes on. So the leading edge is, I always ask, so what's the highest, purest truth that you know of? So if you were living true to that, right, are you acting on, the first question, are you acting on the highest truth you know of or aware of at this moment, yes or no? And they'll go, well, clearly not, yeah? So then you would say, is it true that that's the highest and purest truth that you know of? And then can you absolutely know for sure that what you're doing is true? Again, this is Byron Katie's, if you want to go into the subtleties of it and actually understand the fullness of it. Say for example, if somebody says, yeah, my boss is an asshole, right? And then you would go, is that true? Yes or no? And they'd go, yes. And say, can you absolutely know for sure it's true? Well, no, I can't really. And then you say, and then the way I expand on this in my own way is it true for everybody? Because the truth is true for everybody. And you would say, okay, if they say, yes, he's an arsehole, I know he's an absolute arsehole. Is that true for everyone? Like, is it true for his wife? Is it true for the children? We'll go, no, all right? Well, then it's not true, right? It's not absolutely true, because he's a loving father and a loving husband, right? So how do you react when you believe that thought that he is an arsehole, you know? And what would happen when you, what happens when you believe that thought? Well, it keeps people on a treadmill, resenting having to go to work and all that sort of stuff, right? So you're already changing their perspective and approach, all right? So the second last one is, how do you react when you believe that thought? And then what happens, internally, how do you react? And then what do you physically act out when you believe that thought? How does that change your behaviors, right? So this first one is attitudes, and then the behavior. So the next one, the payoffs, right? Like, this is like a DeMartini thing. Determine the unconscious or the conscious reason behind the attitude or behavior, or the purpose of that perspective and approach, right? So again, this is conscious and dualistic paradigm. So looking here, we've got, what would you gain, or what would be the advantages of holding on to or not releasing this state? So if somebody says, I hate my boss. Okay, what's the advantages? What would you gain from holding on to? What's the advantage of you holding on to that hatred towards your boss? Well, it just stops me from resenting the fact that I have to go to work. Okay, so why do you resent having to go to work? Because I want to build my own business from home and spend more time with my family, right? So how does that actually help you by doing that? Well, it gives me a reason to focus more on developing my own work, so I can get out of that job as soon as possible, right? So it's sort of, they're using it in a negative way to motivate them, right? Or it gives them an excuse to drink more beer at the end of the day or something, right? So number 9, the release. Again, if you're releasing the negative energies, the dualistic energy, or you're realizing, which is tapping into the flow of it, right? Observe the reference point or the experience outside of or beyond. This is where you have to sort of know my language a bit. Beyond the limitations of the existing belief or perspective, right? So I'll go through it and then it'll explain itself. What would you be without that thought? So if you didn't have hatred towards your boss, who would you be without that person? Well, I'd probably be the funny bastard that I am. Okay. So what would you ultimately do without that thought? I'd probably focus more on, focus on doing some stand-up comedy, right? Okay. So then this is the Sedona method element. You ask the person to ask themselves, could I release the hatred, or could I realize the fact that I am a funny bastard, I'm a comedian, right? Could I realize this, or could I release this, right? One is releasing the dualistic, one is realizing that what's really missing, right? Would you, so could I, or then this is where, okay, again in the booklet I'll explain the difference between could I and would you, right? When you're asking could I, that's where the person's asking themselves as a soul, right? Would you, this is where you're asking the ego, would you release or realize this, right? And then if so, when, right? So this is where, to actually explain it in the workshops, you say if so, when, right? So could I release or realize this? Or say yes. Would you release it? Well, I would release the hatred if there's it's yes, no, or if maybe, right? If there's an if, then you say I would do if he apologized for what he said to me, right? And then you say, okay, so if you would or could release it, when would you do that? Well, I'll do it when he forgives me, or when I apologize him. I will do it if I could forgive him for that, only once he's apologized. And then you go back to it. So could you release it, or realize this? And usually you go through that a few times, and then you keep doing the if so when until, okay, I can do it now. There's no more excuses to hold on to it, right? So that's part of the refining of it. So the next one, the 10th one, is make the contrary issue statements to reveal potential truths that counter existing beliefs or perspectives. So what you do is you say the opposite statements of all the above, which is the third step. I think it was the third step. Better have some more of this. Third step. So every statement that was written, you direct it to the self, right? So you go through all the statements and you direct it to yourself. So if I said, that person's a bitch, right? That person's a bitch to me. Then you would turn it around and say, I'm a bitch to myself, right? And then you turn it around and you say, I am a bitch to that person, right? And then you make the opposite statement, which is, that person is not a bitch to me, right? And then you make it the opposite statement is, and that then the opposite action, this is where I'm not up to speed with it fully, but because it's been a while. So the opposite action is, the other person is not a bitch to me is true, and then I am not a bitch to myself or something. Yeah. Anyway, I'll explain that maybe in more detail once I remember it clearer. And that's part of Brandon Bay's work. So if you want to see that being done really clearly, this is directed at the self, other, and all. Right. So remember, you've got the individual, collective, or the all. So you can direct this. The way I do it is I expand it to, okay, if somebody says that person's a bitch to me, you turn it around, I'm saying I'm a bitch to that person. You can expand it and say I'm a bitch to the world. I'm a bitch to everybody, right? And then what that does is it sort of shatters, it sort of like cracks open any pretentiousness or any charge the person's got, yeah? Again, I'll clarify that maybe down the track once I get my head around it. I'm still a bit fuzzy around the edges. So, okay, so the 11th one, how are we going for time? Okay. From here on, it's pretty simple, right? It's just making affirmations, right? So once you get through that, and this is where the turnarounds, ideally until a person gets to this 10th stage of turnarounds, they haven't really changed their perspective or approach. When you see what Byron Katie does on stage with people, it's phenomenal, right? Like most people who know me know that I can't be bothered with a lot of the bottom up stuff. But now that I'm doing all this, I have to really tap into it and tune into it. So it's like I said to my brother, if I have to do this bottom up shit, I'm going to do it right, because I know people have been doing all this work and they've still got issues, even though they've been doing it for 20 years. They're still not at peace. They're still emotionally charged. They get triggered by things. The idea is to blast through that, put it in order where they do work through things in the right order and not just keep missing things or overlooking steps, right? So once you've done the turnarounds, it's a very powerful thing, right? You can't actually you haven't really helped anybody until you've turned around all the energy that's going in the wrong directions so they can focus it on what needs to be done and where they need to go, right? So the 11th one is make declarations affirming the new state of openness and receptivity. And this is when you see people have that breakthrough with Byron Katie on stage. It's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. What we're doing is we're taking that to, like, that's the 10th step. We want to take that to another 13 steps, right? So the 11th one is make declarations affirming new state of openness and receptivity, because that's what the outcome is. Natural outcome is when you get people past that 10th stage, that's the state they're in. So this is where you're now feeling the worthiness and deservedness of being all that I am, and I have the right and permission to be all that I am, right? So you're being whole and complete, and you can do everything you're here to do. You're liberated. So the 12th one is you identify the repercussions or the chain reactions that would occur or would have occurred if the situation never arose, right? So say, for example, if I never had that BMX crash when I was 16 and a half and broke my back, like, God only knows where I would have ended up. You know, I probably would have ended up a professional stuntman, you know, having broken more bones and maybe even killed myself, and God only knows where, right? So you look at the grace within the suffering, right? So, what would be the negative effects or the disadvantages of not having had the experience, whether it's a good experience or bad experience, right? And this, just to give you an idea, right? A lot of people that come to me, they're stuck wanting to recreate previous positive, good experiences or divine experiences. The whole idea of this is to liberate you into the law of repeatlessness, where you can honor the fact that, yes, you may have had a fantastic experience doing something and everybody's just yearning to have the same experience. Oh, I just really want to experience it again. It was so wonderful. No, it will never happen again. That's the law of repeatlessness, right? So a lot of people are looking to recreate things, and it breaks their heart that they can't recreate things, because what they don't realize is they have to take the essence of what they had experienced and what they had revealed to them in the experience and take it to the next step, right? But because they're not on their true path and they're on their compensatory, you know, track to success, they're not able to take the truth and put it on their true path and use that to power their way forward into the new paradigm, right? So they're only going to get what they ultimately want when they're on their true path. And they'll always be in a state of yearning or feeling like they're missing out when they're on their track to success. But when they're not on the path of purity to the path of the ultimate potential, boom, yeah, it all goes without saying. Okay, so we did the, okay, so that's number 12. So number 13, identify the way or the ways this experience has aided in a shift in a perspective and approach to the situation and life, right? So this is once you do the Byron Katie things at step 10, right? So this experience has helped me realize the beliefs or perspectives or approach I had no longer serve myself or the all, right? Because remember, this is all in service to all beings in all worlds in all universes. And it's either true for all beings in all worlds in the universe, or it's not true at all, right? So this is where you're honoring the fact that it's helped you realize that your beliefs or your perspective and or approach no longer serve you. So you're actually honoring the fact that you're transitioning out of this old pattern of behavior into a new behavior, right? A new conscious response rather than a habitual reactive pattern of behavior. So number 14, you identify the stage of the evolution process that has been reached and embraced, right? So this is something that I find extremely powerful, right? This is something I like to go into detail in the workshops, right? You say, I now recognize, realize, accept, comply, experience, express, and evolve in harmony with all divine, universal, natural laws, dynamics, and processes. So the first time through, you may say, oh, now I recognize the fact that I wasn't living true to natural laws, or I realized that I wasn't living in harmony with divine dynamics, or I hadn't accepted the universal processes of life, right? So this is where, if you just say the whole lot, it's actually affirming it on the deepest level, but you can bring it into conscious awareness once you're going through this. You go, oh my God, I can't believe that I can now accept that I have to actually be in harmony with the divine laws, dynamics, and processes, or I have to comply with the natural laws, right? I have to stop smoking. That's a law, right? Does it make sense? So that's where people have that realization, and you can affirm it, right? So again, when you verbalize this, you're adding energy to the signature of that person's frequencies, and it actually affirms that the shift has taken place, right? So number 15, you're honoring the beings involved in the situation and experience the reciprocation of reverence, right? So this is the Ho'oponopono. This is just the basic one. It's not the universal Ho'oponopono. If you know the universal Ho'oponopono, you can bring it in at this stage. Like I did universal Ho'oponopono on Petals last night when I gave her a treatment, just a pure top-down one. So in this sense, you do the I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you, right? And then remember, with the universal Ho'oponopono, you can actually do it where you say it to yourself. If it was like, if it was like I broke my back when I was 16 and a half, I can go back and then say, I accept, if I say that to my 16-year-old self, from this perspective, I wait, and the universal Ho'oponopono, they say that back to them, right? So my 16-and-a-half-year-old self would say, I accept your apology, I forgive you, thank you, I love you, right? So I explained that in the universal Ho'oponopono. You may or may not want to do that. It may or may not be necessary. Again, all of this is essentially like a need-to-know basis, need-to-do basis. So you can skip steps, right? But you don't try to jump ahead. There's a difference there, okay? Okay, so the 16th step is you affirm the dissolution of the issue, situation, having returned to the natural state of being, right? So your natural state of being is that you're pure, you're living a simple life, natural, you're feeling whole and complete in the here and now. So you just say, I'm now pure, simple, natural, whole, complete here and now. If you want to, you can do all that with your eyes closed, tapping your thymus gland or doing a heart plug rub, right? Whatever you feel like you need to do. Again, intuition will guide you. The 17th step is the empowerment, right? So now that you've got all this, you resolved it, right? What you have to affirm that you're empowered with the essence of it all. So you honor the new state of empowerment and the connection to the qualities of spirit, right? Which is freedom, spirit, and liberation. So you say to yourself, again, you can do this tapping on your thymus gland, or you can do this, whatever it is that you spontaneously feeling like you need to experience or express. You say, I am now connected to the internal and external beauty, goodness, and freedom, grace, purity, and liberation. All right? And that will be a genuine experience once you've gone through that process. It won't be just giving lip service to a belief system. All right. So the 18th one, you honor all the elements at work within the play, puzzle, and game of life, right? So the 6 elements of consciousness, again, the more you know and understand the nature of life material, the 6 elements of consciousness are the evolution of consciousness, the play of consciousness, the game of life, the puzzle of life, the meaning of life, and the purpose of life. So in this sense, you're honoring the fact that you're honoring all the divine elements, which is the divine will, divine time, the divine order, the pace of grace, the divine intelligence. You're honoring all 12 divine elements at work within the 6 elements of consciousness, primarily the play, puzzle, and game. And you're also honoring the universal elements and natural elements that created the whole thing in the manifested world, right? So you say, I now accept all the divine, universal, and natural elements that created the issue, right? So the universe, if you look at it, it went to a hell of a lot of trouble to get me to break my back 3 times, right? And to have all the serious other, it went to enormous trouble to pull the rug out from under my feet. So it sat me on my ass to wake up to myself, right? So I can honor the fact that, yes, I had all the nunkery and all the angels and everything like that were just literally sitting on my ass to stop me from going down the wrong path. Like I said the other night, the nunkeries are there just waiting to spear you. Right? So the next one is, I am the embodiment of the essence of love, light, and life, and my nature is oneness, bliss, and immortality. Right? So the 19th one, my conscious alignment and connection to the soul potential via the 6 soul elements and 7 great lists, right? So when you do the workshop, I give you the 6 soul elements and the 7 great lists. So this is where a person is now, they say, I now embrace all seeds of the soul and all roots of the ego. So this is where you're not going, well, you know, I'm just completely dismissing the ego now. You can actually have a bloody good laugh at the fact that you were so egotistical. I mean, like, it's hilarious when I look back and think of all the stunt work and all the extreme sports I did. You know, it was tragic, the fact that it smashed my body up, but it was hilarious to think that that state of mind I was in was even possible. You know, it's like, how is that possible that I could be so stupid? Yeah. So you honor it. You know, I understand that a lot of it was driven by allergies to dairy and food additives and all the rest of it. And I wasn't vegan, obviously, until I was 25. Yeah. So, so the next one is, I am now ready, willing, and able to find and fulfill my true potential, ultimate experience, right? So when you reach your potential, you can have the ultimate experience. And then I now have so this is the 6 elements of human potential. You're ready, willing, able, capable, capacity, potential, right? So the first part is you're ready, willing, and able to find your potential, but then your purpose is that you have to be capable, have the capacity and potential to find and fulfill your true purpose, right? So that's the next sentence. And the next one is, I am looking forward to having the experience again, right? So this is where it sounds like counterproductive and all the rest of it, but you would say, if the whole issue that you went through this was, you know, I resent having, you know, this person as my boss, you turn it around and say, I'm actually looking forward to going to work next day to face my boss for who I am now and to see him for who he is again, right? Or, you know, like if I was to ever break my back again, it was like, well, you know, obviously it's happening. It's like, I've got nothing to gain or lose by anything in that sense. But what truth is going to be revealed to me that I don't know yet? You're always on the leading edge, so you have to embrace whatever comes, yeah? In whatever form, right? So you've got form, function, and flow, experience, expression, evolution. So you just embrace whatever comes, right? So it's not just the experience. The experience can be a form, the experience can be a function, the experience can be a flow, right? It can be a trauma, whatever it is, right? So the 20th one. Now, this is the key part to what I wanted to do with the Universal Ho'oponopono. Like a lot of you know, 80% of the women I've treated have been sexually abused, and 60% of all the men I've treated have been sexually abused. And I had this enormous, like, to an extreme amount of people. And this is the one thing that I realized that people weren't able to get to. And this is part of what happened when I finished writing the book. And it literally fell on its ass and failed, right? It was the worst thing I ever did was write that book, right? At the time when I realized, oh my God, no one's ready for it, right? So I had all this top-down information here, and everybody's all over here. You know, here's the book and here's the information where everyone's at. They could not align and connect with what I was saying. So they're over here on the top of their shit pile, having done all the work of this, and they're all over here. Yes, I've conquered, I've dealt with my dark side, and I'm dealing with my shadow self, and I've healed the inner child, and all this sort of bullshit. But they could not transition into align and connect with the true top-down experience, and it bewildered me for a long time. It's like, what the hell? You know, I thought I'd write the book and it'd be immediately self-evident, obvious, and everybody would gravitate towards it, having done all this other work, all the bottom-up shit. They could align and connect with the top-down. And for the life of me, I could not figure out what was stopping people from making that transition to connect with the true top-down experience. They were caught up in the stories. They had all the payoffs. I understood all that, but what was really going on? And I can't quite recall at the moment what made me realize this. But what's really going on is they get to the top of the pile and they've risen above it and they're at peace with it all for what it is, and they can laugh about it. But deep down, the true connection's not there, and they resent the fact that it actually happened to them, right? So if somebody was raped, you know, gang raped or whatever, they're traumatized. And then what happens is they go, yes, I've forgiven the person, but I can't forgive God, because why the fuck did that happen to me? I was a good person. I was a good child. I didn't deserve that. I didn't deserve that I was a child. And they haven't actually made peace with the Creator, right? And that's the key point, right? They don't actually reconcile the fact that it happened to them, and they understand it from whatever perspective, right? But it's the reconciliation that's missing. And that's what's stopping people from aligning, connecting to the true state of grace that I'm talking about, right? So reconciliation is where you reconcile the entire experience as being divine. Yes, it's all the divine will, it's all the divine time, pace of grace, where every form or being is an instrument of service to all, right? So, you know, everything and everyone that's ever wronged you was the divine in another form, just getting you to the point where you can go, oh, okay, I don't have to take this personally and seriously. I'm as a soul, as a spiritual being, I'm beyond being tainted. I'm beyond the influence of this. I just have to honor the fact that it's actually steering me where I need to go. It's full trust, full surrender, whatever you want to call it. So you say, I now honor the 12 divine elements at work within the 6 elements of consciousness. That means you're no longer trying to become anybody. You're just affirming that you are nothing more than an instrument of service to all beings in all worlds, right? That's where you realize that that's where you're like now living like Archangel Michael, just doing what you need to do in the moment, right? So 21 is the completion of the process of healing and initiating growth by, right, when you do the ritual of eating, this is where you align and connect with everything. This is what, having reconciled, this is where you now take a conscious alignment and connection. When you eat or do anything, before you do anything, you offer it in service to all. You bless or purify whatever it is you're going to eat or do. And then you offer gratefulness for the experience. So the first thing is, you say, may all beings in all worlds express their true nature. That affirms the inevitability of your purpose, right? So remember, it's not just you're on the journey towards your ultimate potential and the inevitability of that, but where you meet your experience, your ultimate experience, all other beings converge at that same point, that emergence point, right? So you're honoring the inevitability of that in everybody's life, right? So like the Nanankaris say, if you don't feel that it's inevitable that every last man, woman, and child on the planet experiences and expresses their true nature within your lifetime, you're not on the divine timeline. You haven't actually filtered out all the above, which is what we've just gone through, to make you feel, and not just believe it or wish for it, make you feel the inevitability that everybody's going to wake up and we're all going to share the ultimate experience. Okay, so that affirms the inevitability of that, which is the offering, right? Then you say, all of my thoughts, words, and deeds are now in honor of the truth within all. So that affirms the selflessness. So that means that you're just doing everything purely as an instrument of grace to all. So when you bless food, you're actually purifying the energy, and the purity is the absence of selfishness, right? So then the third one is, I am grateful for everything past, present, and future, knowing the inevitability of the future and the reasons for bringing you into the now, having come from where you're going. So past, present, and future are all divine, and that energizes your being and clarifies your path, right? It fully energizes you to be ready, willing, and able to get on with what's next. The 22 is honor the entire process of healing and growth and all the means by which it has been presented, right? And then you say, I am grateful for the opportunity to experience evolution through the universal method. So you're actually now turning it back at the fact that you listen to your intuition to get on the call. You're honoring the fact that you listen to your intuition to get to the workshop or read it online or watch this video online. You're honoring the fact that this was an inevitable point within your journey. And you're honoring the fact that the grace is coming to you through this, to whatever extent you're able to receive it, to whatever extent you're able to put it into practice. It's all perfect, right? Sounds pretty new agey, but it's true, right? So then the next one is the transformation. You acknowledge the total shift in the state and perspective and the potential of what is yet to unfold. This is just getting you to the leading edge of consciousness, expanding into the unknown. So you're honoring everything that's yet to come. And the nature of it is it's always beyond you, right? So I am now free or liberated to be all that I am and live and share a new, which is all the essence of the ultimate that's yet to come, top-down experience, right? And now the last bit is where you anchor in the entire experience with a celebrating victory stance, right? And when I traveled around the world, everywhere I went, everybody, whether it's kids and playing soccer in the middle of India or cricket in England, whenever there was a victory, they'd do the victory stance, right? So when you finish, you stand in the victory stance, feet shoulder, slightly more than shoulder width apart, and you look up to the sky, and you can do it eyes open, eyes closed, and you punch the sky in victory stance. And within that, you do the breathing, and you do it with the big smile on your face, and you do it with your eyes, you do it eyes closed up and in, right? But your feet have to be parallel as well. You can't do it toes out, just parallel. So your feet is parallel. And I won't go into all the neurology of it, but you're actually firing up the opposite pathways that comes with the Moro reflex, right? If somebody is really angry, right, and they do this, I just want to explode, right? The Moro reflex is if you hold a baby and pretend to drop it, it does that, right? So what you're doing is you're using the same pathways as a divine expression, right? So that's what's actually activating in you, right? So you're resetting, redirecting that energy into a divine expression and not just a trapped emotion or anything like that, right? Anybody who's angry, right, if you look at anger, it's just laughter turned inside out. If you look at grief, that's just gratitude turned inside out. That's just honor turned inside out, right? So this whole process is dissolving all the grief, terror, and rage into gratitude, laughter, and honor, right? And life and celebration, right? It's actually celebration, right? If you're fear, you're not celebrating life. This is all the 18 seeds of love, light, life, right? Which is what I talked about in the Nature of Life's video. And I think that's pretty well it. So we're going okay for time, just on time, but it's half an hour over, but anyway. So any questions or comments, or did I leave anything out there, Mark?
No, worked through the process very well.
Okay.
I'll
just let you.
Maybe want to address that, like, because it's a good point, and it's the type of thing people ask when they're not. Yeah, I'll let you address it. But Natalie actually asks, how can a pedophile experience be a divine experience?
Good question. Actually, I might just stop sharing the screen there. Is there any other questions that require me to share the screen?
I don't think so. No.
Okay. Alrighty. How can a pedophile experience be divine? Yeah, is that the question?
Yes. Yeah, be a divine experience. Yep.
That will not make sense until you've actually gone through step 3. Yeah. And it's like once you, well, actually no, until you've actually clarified it all at step 3 and done the turnaround at step 10, that I could tell you, but it will only be theory and philosophy, right? And due to the time factor, I won't go into it, but the best way to find that answer is to watch Byron Katie work with people on her videos. And she addresses that sort of thing exceptionally well, better than I can, because like I said, I've only been doing this bottom-up approach for just 2.5 years. And like in that sense, I'm relatively new to it. And it does take a lot of skills to learn to have the resources and the language and everything like that to be able to articulate it. She's been doing it as long as I've been doing the top down. She's been doing the bottom up. So, all the credence to her. But I still haven't really been actively doing the bottom up stuff for that 2.5 years. I've been more bringing the holistic approach into the bottom up one. So I haven't actually been practicing it that much to be as articulate with it all as what she is. But when you look at the way she does it, and she's got the personality to guide people through those sorts of things. I do it with my clients because I have a different way of going about it. It makes perfect sense, right? So it's a bit like, if, again, for what it's worth, when Jesus was supposedly crucified on the cross, it's when he looks at them and he goes, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do," right? And then I think that was after he said, "My God, what?" No, it was like beforehand. And then he said, then he's dying and he goes, "My God, why hast thou forsaken me?" And then he feels like he's, being abandoned. And then he realizes, well, hang on a second. You can actually put the whole universal method to what happened. He goes, well, hang on a second. This is all divine. And then he wakes up to himself, and then he goes, "Into your hands I commend my spirit." And then he supposedly left the body, right? But that's where the stories match up in this, right? You have to reconcile. You have to accept that it is all divine, yeah? And until people, and what that question is exactly why I did this, because even though people have done Byron Katie's work and Brandon Bay's work and the Sedona method and DeMartini method, they were still coming to me with more than just a residue of being a rape victim or something, right? Or a victim of a pedophile. So again, this is still early days, so just bear with me until I can explain all this and articulate it clearly. I just haven't got to the point where I'm that efficient with it yet. But Byron Katie explains it better than I can at the moment. So were there any other questions? I just saw Marco's question.
Yeah, and I was perhaps going to say that's worth touching on as well, that knowing that when you look at the origins of thoughts and then the biological aspect, obviously what leads to someone perpetrating those types of things as well, and exactly. The divinity in that.
Exactly. I mean, like if you understand, I wrote a blog about the 18 origins of thoughts and the nature and types of thoughts. If you read that, it'll give you an understanding of what's causing that attitude and behavior of pedophiles and rapists and that sort of thing. And like, again, I deal with these people on a daily basis, right? If you have a rapist, a serial rapist come to see you and they say, "Look, I'm a rapist, and I've been busted and all the rest, I've got to go to court." They are more often than not the most wonderful, sweet, nice people you can imagine, right? It sounds a bit ridiculous, but they're no different than a gambling addict. They're no different than a person who's diabetic. Like I said, if they've got a bug in their gut that's over-energizing their sexual centers, they're out of control, right? The very same bug that gets in the hepatic flexure, if it's under the splenic flexure, they have all the diabetic symptoms, and they're reminiscing, and their fear of going to certain places, and have all this poor me syndrome. So the whole mental state and physical conditions completely different depending on where the bug is within their system. You get rid of that bug, and they're going, "Oh my God, what the hell was I thinking?" Right? Makes sense? So there's a mental state and a physical condition that comes with all these infections, whether it's a chemical or microorganism. So when you look at it that way, you can have compassion for them, right? They do not want to be doing what they're doing, and they're sitting in front of me, bawling their eyes out, knowing that they can't believe they actually hurt someone, right? But they, you know, like a lot of people, when they actually get under the influence of something, they literally lose control of themselves, yeah? And you can't in any way hold that against them. You have to find the love and the everything beyond that, yeah? And I've been dealing with that, you know, for like 30 years, yeah? So Romeo's just asked a question. Can you show once more the heart plug and thymus, where to touch exactly? Okay, so with the thymus one, you find the notch here. It's straight down the middle of your sternum. There's a bump in the middle of the sternum. So it's more pronounced on some people than others, but it's really literally sort of more slightly towards the top of your sternum. So more above the halfway point. So there's that bump, that's the thymus gland, right? And the heart plug runs between the third and fourth rib on the left side, right? So underneath here that's the first and second rib. So if you just feel that that's first and second, second and third, fourth and third and fourth, right? So if you can see that clearly enough. So you got 1 and 2, 2 and 3, 3 and 4. So it's just across in there. And if you feel it, it's actually usually quite tender on a lot of people, right? So depending on who they are, I can literally rub the crap out of that point, right? And there's 5 points I'll go into detail in the workshop as to which point you noticed what's been triggering, you know, in terms of what organs and the personality that they've got around that. But that's going into the details of it. So any other questions?
Not in the chat, so if anyone's got anything they want to ask live, now's the time. But other than that, there's none there.
All right, so was that clear enough? I mean, like, you've got the worksheets now, so the thing I recommend is everybody just start practicing it. And even if you don't fully understand it, you don't fully get it, just keep working your way through it, because the more you familiarize yourself with it, I would like to be able to present it in a way that people don't have to go and watch Byron Katie or listen to a Brandon Bayes thing. Yeah, but like that's, again, this is just early stages, you know. So I haven't presented this material that often in order to be able to be fully up to speed with it all. And it's not something I practice a lot myself either. Those people who practice it a lot, you know, by the end of me doing a workshop, you know, a couple of weeks in a row, I know it inside out and know exactly where it's at. But like I said, I'm a little bit rusty on it. But practice makes perfect, yeah. And so now that the worksheets are public, I will, the ones I sent you, I think I may have sent you, may have been out of date. I think the ones I posted on the Facebook page are the recent ones. But I've got to try and somehow, I may do a blog on this where I attach a PDF so people can download the PDF rather than the JPEGs off Facebook. And you just look at the top right-hand corner, there'll be the date as to what version it is. So there's a couple of things there that I noticed I need to improve. And yeah, so now that this video is available as well, you can watch back over that as many times as you need to until you get your head and heart around it as well. So if there's no other questions, we'll call it a night. And thank you everybody for attending. And no other questions, Mark?
No, none.
Okay.
None that come up. Just a reminder. Obviously, tomorrow we're backing up again and doing 2 nights in a row. So tomorrow night we've got the draw your sword call number 5. So another big night coming up tomorrow night. If anyone wants to be a part of that, obviously email Brian again, and we'll send you the link. And that's going to be good fun now that we've actually got the Universal Declaration of Independence and Sovereignty out there in the social media land and gaining traction. It's going to be good fun to get together before our ritual on the weekend.
Yeah, well, like I said, the Declaration of Independence and Sovereignty is still only in its early stages, and I haven't finished it, but that's probably going to happen in the next few days. It doesn't matter whether it's finished or not before the ritual, but we'll go into detail with that tomorrow, and I'm hoping to have the lists all compiled and published before tomorrow night. Yeah, so the blacklist and whitelist, it'll all make sense when you look into it. So, yeah. All right, well, plenty more to come. Come tomorrow night with your swords drawn and sharpened, because we've got a lot to do. And, yeah, I look forward to sharing all that with you again. And thanks again for joining us tonight. It's been a pleasure. And it's good to get all this off my chest. I've been sitting on it for a long time. And thank you again, Mark. Brilliant hosting as usual. And I'll catch up with everybody soon. Bye.